So now that we've been doing all the work with equations of lines, now we're going to start taking a look at some of the properties of line segments. So our goal today is I can find the midpoint of a line segment using the coordinates of its endpoints. So the definition for a midpoint, the midpoint of a line segment is the point on the line that is equidistant from the endpoints. So you can see on my graph here, so I've got this point, this first point on the left is the point 1, 2. The point on the other end, that's the point 9, 8. And this point in the center is the point 5, 5. Okay? Now, interesting here, if I want to find the distance from the left end point and the midpoint here, I can create a right angle triangle here, and this bottom side has a length of 4. This side going vertical here has a side of 3. And if we use Pythagorean theorem, we're not going to calculate it here, but I'll just give it to you. The distance from the first end point to the midpoint ends up being 5. Well, what happens here is that when we do it from the midpoint to the right end point, the exact same thing happens. It's 4, it's 3, and it's 5. So this is 5 on that half, and this is 5 on that half. Now, a couple things to make note of here. When it says that it's equidistant or equidistant from the endpoints, maybe the easier way to think about it is the midpoint is the average of the two endpoints. And I'll show you exactly what that means. So let's take a look at the x values of the endpoints. So my two endpoints, the x value for the left endpoint is 1. The x value for the right endpoint is 9. So if I'm going to find the average of the endpoints, I would add the 1 and the 9 together and then divide by 2. So I add 1 and 9, I get 10. 10 divided by 2 is equal to 5. Now let's take a look at the y's. So the y values are 2 and 8. So if I'm going to take the average of those, it'll be 2 plus 8 divided by 2, and I end up getting 5 there as well. So that means that the midpoint of those endpoints is the point 5, 5. And as you can see in our graph, that is in fact true. Okay? So the formula that we end up with, so to find the coordinates of the midpoint of a line segment, you will simply average the endpoints coordinates. So what you end up doing is x1 plus x2 divided by 2. That will give you the first number in the midpoint. And y1 plus y2 divided by 2 will give you the y value in the midpoint. And we just use a capital M to represent the midpoint that we're working with. Okay, so we want to write that as a capital M so we don't mix it up with the small m that we use for slope. So let's take a look at some examples. Determine the midpoint of the line segment with endpoints 4, 9, and 2, 1. So I'm going to write my formula down. x1 plus x2 divided by 2, comma, y1 plus y2 divided by 2. It's an odd formula because it's the coordinates of a point. So there's a comma in the middle, there's brackets around the outside. So we need to make sure that we plug everything into its proper spot. So remember that the 4 and the 2 here are the x's. So 4 plus 2 divided by 2. And then the y's are the 9 and the minus 1. So 9, and I could write 9 plus negative 1, or I could just write 9 minus 1 there. I'll get the same answer either way. So remember that you have to figure out the answer on top before you divide by 2. So if you're ever using your calculator, make sure you punch in 4 plus 2, hit equals, and then divide it by 2. So when you calculate your midpoint here, you end up with 3, 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to plot my points on the graph here. So 4, 9 will be there, and 2, negative 1 is there. So these are line segments. So with these line segments that we're working with, they actually stop at the endpoints. They don't continue on like we've done with the graphs of lines. And we just calculated that the midpoint would be 3, 4, which is that point right there. So that makes sense on our graph that that is the midpoint of that line segment. All right, the diameter of a circle has endpoints 4, 3, and negative 2, 6. What is the center? So here it's important to realize that the center of circle is the midpoint of the diameter. So think about the diameter of the circle is goes all the way across the circle through the center. So the center of the circle is the midpoint of that diameter. So all we need to do here then is plug things into our formula. So remember, we're going to add the x's together and divide by 2, comma, add the y's together and divide by 2. So the average of the x's and the average of the y's. So we're going to end up with 1, and then we're going to end up with 9 divided by 2, and we can just write that as a decimal there. You could write 4.5 as well, but 1 and 4.5 is good as well. So in this one, therefore, the center of the circle is 1 and 4.5. So that's going to be our solution to that one. All right, I'm going to stop here. We'll tackle example 3 as a warm-up tomorrow, and then you'll have an opportunity to practice. Thanks.